Keanu Reeves, the beloved actor known for his roles in The Matrix, John Wick, and countless other action-packed films, had always kept a humble and grounded personality. Outside of the flashing lights of Hollywood, he was often seen embracing a quieter, more reflective lifestyle. While he was known for his charitable acts and generosity, Keanu had little experience in the world of high-powered business dealings or corporate boardrooms. But on this particular day, something completely unexpected happened. Keanu had been invited to visit a company's headquarters, a business he had supported over the years in various ways, to simply check out how things were going. It was meant to be a casual meeting, an easy visit with no expectations, until things quickly spiraled into a chaotic scene. The company was one that Keanu had a vague association with, an investment that had been arranged a while ago when an executive had approached him with an offer. He had signed some documents without much thought, thinking they were more about lending his name and brand than actually being involved in the day-to-day running of a business. Keanu was always busy, with his movies and business ventures were often secondary to his passion for acting, so when the invitation came to visit the company's headquarters, Keanu saw it as just another routine obligation, a polite gesture rather than a high-stakes event. As Keanu entered the conference room, he was immediately struck by the sharp contrast between the sterile, high-tech environment and the more relaxed creative atmosphere he was used to. The room was filled with neatly dressed executives, all engrossed in serious discussions about the company's future. The polished wood of the table gleamed under the bright lights, while the walls were adorned with futuristic charts and growth projections. The air was thick with tension, as everyone seemed to be debating different strategies for the company's next big move. The executives were sharp and ambitious, focused solely on maximizing profits and solidifying their place in the market. Keanu had no intention of disrupting the meeting. He simply sat quietly in the corner, observing the room, and trying to stay out of the way. As he sat there trying to absorb the environment, Keanu couldn't help but notice how unfamiliar he felt. Despite being an investor in the company, he didn't feel like he truly belonged in the room. There was a cold, mechanical atmosphere to the meeting that didn't sit well with him. The constant buzz of numbers and statistics was overwhelming, and he found himself increasingly disconnected from the conversations that swirled around him. He had never been part of a corporate world that was so driven by logic and profit. His life had been one of creative expression and personal connection. Keanu was about to leave when the tension in the room peaked. The discussion had reached a boiling point, with executives clashing over different visions for the company's future. That's when one of the board members, a man in a sharp, tailored suit, noticed Keanu sitting quietly in the corner. The man was clearly frustrated, his face reddening as he pointed towards Keanu and shouted across the table, "Sir, you need to leave. You don't belong here." The words hit Keanu like a cold slap. Confused, he looked around the room, unsure of what was happening. It took a moment for him to fully understand that he had been asked to leave. He had no idea what was going on. Was he not welcome at the meeting? Did they not recognize who he was? Keanu stood up, trying to understand the situation. The other executives stared at him, some with disdain, others with confusion. It was clear that this was not just an ordinary business meeting, it was a power struggle, and Keanu was seen as an outsider in a world of cutthroat competition. Realizing there was no point in causing a scene, Keanu quietly walked toward the door. His heart raced as he left the room, feeling embarrassed and out of place. For someone who had spent so much of his life in front of cameras and under intense scrutiny, this moment was different. It was personal, and it stung more than he anticipated. As Keanu walked down the hallway, trying to process what had just happened, he couldn't help but feel like he had been thrust into a world that didn't make sense to him. He had always avoided the harsh realities of the business world, preferring the creative space he thrived in. But this was an entirely different experience, one that felt uncomfortably real. Keanu made his way to the elevator, his mind racing with questions. Why had he been kicked out? What was it about the company's boardroom culture that had led to this moment? As the elevator doors closed behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was no accident. He had been blindsided, left in the dark about the extent of his involvement in the business. It wasn't until later that Keanu learned a shocking truth about his role in the company. In reality, Keanu was a major shareholder, having signed an agreement years ago that had gone largely unnoticed by him. While he had thought the deal was about lending his name and reputation to the company, it turned out that he had a significant stake in the business. In fact, he was essentially the one in charge, even though he had never been informed of his ownership. The executives who had kicked him out of the room were fully aware of this, yet they had kept him out of the loop, assuming it would be easier to run the company without his involvement. They had underestimated Keanu's ability to lead, and more importantly, they had underestimated the power of human connection. The truth came as a shock to Keanu, but it also gave him an unexpected sense of clarity. His involvement in the company wasn't just a passive role. He had the ability to influence its direction. This realization marked the beginning of a new chapter for Keanu, a chapter where he would learn to balance his creative pursuits with the unexpected responsibilities of being a business owner. In the end, being kicked out of the boardroom became one of the most eye-opening experiences of Keanu Reeves's life. It was a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected situations could lead to the greatest personal growth. And even when you're not looking for it, life has a way of showing you the path you're meant to take. The boardroom had always been a place where power, influence, and control were key. The executives who had managed the company for years had become accustomed to operating without interference. Keanu's name was valuable in the eyes of the public, but the company's day-to-day operations were handled solely by the people in charge. They had made the decision to keep Keanu's ownership a secret, believing that the less he knew about his stake, the better they could run the company without his input or what they assumed, his distractions. But that fateful day in the boardroom changed everything. When Keanu had been kicked out, the tension in the room was at its peak. The executives had assumed that Keanu, the actor, was nothing more than a figurehead in their business. But as he walked out of the meeting, confused and angry, he started to realize that he had been part of something much bigger than he ever imagined. As Keanu sat in the waiting area, reflecting on what had just happened, he began to piece together the events of the past. He had been part of this company all along. He owned it. The board members had kept him out of the loop, knowing that they could make decisions without his consent. But now it was clear to Keanu that this was no longer something he could ignore. After leaving the building that day, Keanu called his lawyer. He was determined to understand what had happened and how he had ended up in this situation. The lawyer confirmed that Keanu was indeed the majority shareholder of the company and had been for years. The news hit him hard. He hadn't signed on just to lend his name. He had been an active participant in the company's success, whether he knew it or not. The next step for Keanu was to take control. He had spent years focusing on his acting career, but now he had a new challenge ahead of him. The company that had kept him in the dark was his. Keanu had never been interested in the corporate world, but the truth was undeniable. He had a responsibility, not just as an actor but as a business owner, to step up and understand the company he was a part of. The first thing Keanu did was demand a meeting with the executives, the same ones who had assumed they could run the company without his involvement. When they arrived at the meeting, they were shocked to see Keanu at the helm, asking questions they weren't prepared for. The tables had turned, and they were no longer in control. Keanu was different from what they expected. He wasn't an angry boss looking to control every aspect of the company. Instead, he approached the situation with calm professionalism and a desire to understand. He listened to their plans, asked thoughtful questions, and pointed out areas where they had strayed from the company's core values. Keanu wasn't just a figurehead anymore. He was an active participant, and his presence began to shape the company in a new direction. What was most surprising was Keanu's approach to leadership. While the executives expected him to be a hands-off investor, he proved to be the opposite. He became deeply involved in the company's culture, ensuring that the values of creativity, integrity, and transparency were at the forefront of every decision. His focus was on people, both employees and customers, and he quickly realized that the company's success wasn't just about numbers and profits. It was about creating a work environment that encouraged collaboration, honesty, and mutual respect. As Keanu began to shift the company's direction, he also took a step back from the spotlight. He didn't want his role as the owner to overshadow the work of the employees who had been tirelessly building the brand. Instead, he quietly worked behind the scenes, helping foster a culture that valued teamwork over competition. Under his guidance, the company experienced a reinvention, a change in leadership style that was rooted in empathy and connection. But the story doesn't end there. The surprise of Keanu's involvement in the company became a story that captured the public's attention. News outlets reported on how the famous actor was secretly running a successful business empire. What started as a mystery about how Keanu had come to own the company soon turned into a tale of a Hollywood star, using his influence for good in the corporate world. Over time, Keanu learned valuable lessons about business that he never thought he would need to understand. He came to see the company not as a financial asset but as a reflection of his values. He wasn't just an actor, he was a businessman who, despite his lack of experience, was shaping something bigger than himself. Keanu's journey into the world of business was one of unexpected transformation. From being a Hollywood actor, known for his roles in action-packed movies, to unexpectedly finding himself in charge of a corporation, Keanu had stepped into an entirely new role. He learned that sometimes the most powerful moments in life come from the most unexpected places, and that, with the right mindset, even the most unassuming individuals can make a profound impact in the business world. In the end, Keanu Reeves's story wasn't just about his rise to fame in Hollywood or his accidental role as a business owner. It was about how he found a way to connect with people, bring heart into the corporate world, and turn a business venture into something meaningful for everyone involved. It's a reminder that sometimes it's not the big decisions that define us, it's the small moments of realization that lead to the most significant changes. Keanu stood frozen, processing the words as they sank in. His mind raced as he tried to reconcile the reality that had just been laid out before him. The idea that he, the laid-back actor, the guy who had always avoided the trappings of fame and fortune, was actually the owner of a company he had never even actively managed, was almost too absurd to believe. Wait, Keanu muttered, still trying to wrap his head around it. I own this company? I'm the major shareholder? The employee nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable but also relieved that Keanu finally knew the truth. Yes, Mr. Reeves. A few years ago you signed a deal with the investors. Your name was put on the ownership papers, but the board has kept it quiet, assuming you wouldn't be involved. Keanu could barely contain his surprise. He had thought it was just another one of those business deals where his name was used to boost credibility or visibility. He had never expected to own a significant part of a growing business. The fact that he was the major shareholder, someone with real control, left him speechless. So all this time, I've been running the show without even knowing it? Keanu finally asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. The people in there, the ones who just kicked me out, did they know? The employee shifted uncomfortably before answering. Yes, sir. They knew. They've been managing everything, but they kept you out of the loop. They thought it would be easier to make decisions without involving you. But they've underestimated you. Keanu shook his head, still processing the enormity of what he was hearing. He was a major player in a company, but he had never felt like part of it. He had always been focused on his acting career, and his few minor investments were simply stepping stones toward larger creative ventures. The world of high-stakes business deals, corporate strategy, and boardroom politics was never something he had sought out. Now it seemed that all of it had found him, and the weight of that realization was like a sudden shift in gravity. As the employee continued to explain how the company had grown under his ownership, Keanu couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. On one hand, he was stunned by the idea of being in control of something so big. On the other, he felt alienated from the very thing that was now his. How could he lead a company he had no personal connection to? How could he make decisions for a business he had never even thought about? Keanu had always prided himself on living a humble life, focused on his work and personal growth rather than the pursuit of power or material wealth. Now, standing in this corporate environment, it all felt like a foreign world. It wasn't just about the shock of ownership. It was about the realization that the life he had built, the one that was shaped by his passion for acting and giving back, had been entwined with a corporate venture he hadn't even known existed. So, he left the building. The quiet of the street was a welcome relief. Keanu found himself walking aimlessly, trying to clear his mind. The day had turned into a strange whirlwind of confusion and revelation, and the more he thought about it, the more questions arose. How had it all been kept from him? Why hadn't anyone bothered to bring him into the fold? Was this something he could continue to ignore, or was it something that demanded his attention? That evening, Keanu sat alone in his apartment, his thoughts scattered. He wasn't sure what to do next. The company he owned was growing fast, but was it the kind of company he wanted to be associated with? What kind of leader would he be? He had always been a creator, a visionary in the world of film, but this was a different kind of responsibility. He reached out to some of his closest friends, people who had known him for years. He shared the news with them, recounting the events of the day, the boardroom incident, the unexpected ownership, the overwhelming realization. They were as shocked as he was, but they reminded him of one thing that he had forgotten in the chaos: his integrity. Keanu's friends, who had seen his growth over the years, reminded him that the same qualities he brought to his acting, patience, understanding, and dedication, could be applied to leadership. They encouraged him to take his time, to learn what he could about the company, and to shape it into something that aligned with his values. They told him he didn't have to become a ruthless business tycoon or abandon his authenticity. Instead, he could lead with kindness and vision, just as he had led in his personal life. The realization was profound. Keanu had always been known for his calm, grounded nature, qualities that had helped him connect with fans and fellow actors. Those same qualities could help him navigate this unexpected business venture, and he didn't need to change who he was to do so. Keanu wasn't just an actor anymore. He was a business owner with the power to shape a company's future in his own image. With renewed determination, Keanu began to study the company's operations. He read through reports, learned about the employees, and began to meet with the executives, not to assert his power but to understand what was happening under his watch. Slowly but surely, Keanu began to make his mark, not through high-pressure tactics or strategic takeovers, but through thoughtful discussions and a focus on building trust within the company. In the months that followed, Keanu Reeves, the actor-turned-business owner, was no longer an absentee figurehead. He became an active participant, and his involvement transformed the company. He focused on creating a culture of transparency and respect, making sure that all employees felt valued and heard. Under his leadership, the company flourished, but more importantly, Keanu had found a new purpose, a sense of fulfillment that came from not just acting, but from making a positive impact in an entirely different world. From being a passive, unaware owner to taking control of his destiny, Keanu had learned that life's greatest surprises can sometimes turn into the most rewarding opportunities. And for Keanu, this was just the beginning. As Keanu made his way into the boardroom, the atmosphere felt different. The once imposing room of high-powered executives with their expensive suits and polished tactics now seemed less intimidating. The board members were visibly uneasy, their eyes darting to each other as if unsure how to react to the man they had quietly excluded from the company's operations for so long. Keanu, in his signature laid-back style, stood before them not with the arrogance of a corporate mogul, but with a quiet strength that only someone who had never been hungry for power could possess. The executives, all of whom had spent years building and running the company under the assumption that Keanu had no interest in being involved, were caught off guard by his decision to take charge. They had expected to continue working without him, leaving him in the shadows of ownership. But Keanu wasn't going to let that happen. "You know," Keanu began, his voice calm but firm, "it's strange to find out that I own this place. But I think I'd like to be involved in the decisions going forward. Let's do this the right way, together." His words weren't just an announcement. They were a challenge. Keanu wasn't there to play the role of a distant owner who only showed up. for major announcements or quarterly reports. He wanted to be a part of the company, not as a figurehead, but as someone who genuinely cared about its direction and the people who made it successful. The room fell silent. Keanu's calm demeanor only made the tension in the air more palpable. The executives, who had grown comfortable with their position of authority and control, were forced to confront the fact that their most valuable asset, Keanu Reeves, was now a hands-on participant. It wasn't just about his celebrity status anymore. It was about his ownership, his influence, and his vision. One of the senior executives, a man in his 50s who had been leading the company's financial division, cleared his throat and shifted in his seat. "Mr. Reeves, we weren't expecting you to be this involved," he began, trying to sound authoritative but visibly uncertain. "We've been running things smoothly and—" Keanu raised a hand, a gesture that was respectful, but assertive. "I'm sure things have been smooth, but I wasn't here, was I? I wasn't part of the decisions, and that's why I'm here now. I care about how this company treats its people. I care about how our customers feel. I care about ethics. You can't put a price on that." The room was still. Keanu wasn't raising his voice, but his words carried weight. This wasn't an actor trying to buy his way into a business for publicity. This was someone who believed in doing things the right way. He wasn't trying to make enemies or upset the system, but he was demanding transparency. He wanted fairness. He wanted accountability. "Keanu, we respect your vision," another executive chimed in, trying to regain some control of the conversation. "But business decisions need to be made quickly, and not always with a focus on sentiment." Keanu smiled, but it was a knowing smile, one that conveyed more than a hint of insight. Sentiment is what drives business. It's what drives the world. You can make all the cold decisions you want, but without heart, those decisions won't stick. People need to feel like they're working for something worthwhile, not just a paycheck. We can have a successful company without sacrificing our values. He paused, letting the silence settle around him. The executives had been trained to focus on the numbers, the profits, and the immediate future. They had no room for heart. But Keanu was showing them another way, one that didn't disregard financial stability, but made sure that the human element remained at the core of every decision. "I don't need to be a mogul, and I don't need to be the face of the company, but I'm here to make sure we're building something that aligns with who we are as individuals. That means ethical practices. It means putting people first. If we're not doing that, then we're doing something wrong." Keanu's calm, straightforward manner caught them off guard. They had expected a famous actor to make a grand entrance with flashy ideas and empty promises. Instead, they found a man who was both introspective and visionary, one who understood that business success came from more than just profits. As the meeting continued, Keanu quietly took notes and asked thoughtful questions. He didn't dominate the conversation, but he listened, really listened, to the board's ideas. And when he spoke, his words were measured, always pointing back to the values he held dear. Over the next few hours, he didn't just make decisions. He shifted the boardroom's entire atmosphere. No longer was it about power plays or egos. It was about creating a space where everyone felt heard, valued, and invested in the company's long-term success. By the end of the meeting, the mood had changed dramatically. The once tense and skeptical executives were now nodding along, acknowledging that Keanu had a point. It wasn't just about the bottom line. It was about the culture, the people, and the shared responsibility to make the company something meaningful. Keanu's presence didn't overshadow the work being done. It enhanced it. He wasn't there to disrupt the system, but to ensure that it was built on the right principles. And in doing so, he earned the respect of the board members who had no choice but to admit that his unconventional approach might just be the thing the company needed to thrive in the modern world. As the meeting wrapped up, one of the executives spoke up with a newfound respect. "I think we can all agree that having you involved is a good thing, Mr. Reeves. Let's make this work. Together." Keanu nodded, a small but satisfied smile crossing his face. "Absolutely. Let's do this the right way." And just like that, Keanu Reeves, the actor who never sought power or influence, became a force for positive change in the corporate world, proving that you don't have to be ruthless to lead. Sometimes all it takes is a little heart. From that day forward, Keanu Reeves embraced his newfound role as an active participant in the company, but in a way that felt entirely true to who he was. Unlike the stereotypical image of a power-hungry executive, Keanu didn't come in with grand plans to overhaul everything. He wasn't interested in micromanaging or making sweeping changes. Instead, he focused on something far more important, ensuring that the company stayed true to its values and operated with integrity. Keanu's approach was refreshingly humble. While the other board members might have been focused on maximizing profits, Keanu cared more about the people behind the numbers. He didn't care about flashy offices or extravagant perks. In fact, he didn't spend much time in the corner office at all. Instead, Keanu made it a priority to walk the halls of the company, talk to the employees, and understand their work, their challenges, and their aspirations. He took the time to listen to their stories, learn about their lives, and make them feel seen and heard. This genuine interest in the well-being of the staff created a shift in the company's culture. No longer was it a place where people simply worked for a paycheck. It became a place where employees felt valued, respected, and motivated to do their best work. Keanu's quiet leadership inspired loyalty, and people began to feel like they were a part of something bigger than just a business. They were part of a community, a team with shared values and a shared purpose. The board meetings, which once had been cold and transactional, transformed into spaces where collaboration thrived. Keanu encouraged open, honest conversations and made sure that everyone's voice was heard. He never belittled anyone or dismissed ideas. Instead, he helped the team find common ground. His calm demeanor and patient approach put everyone at ease, and slowly but surely, the walls between executives and employees began to break down. As the company grew, Keanu remained focused on what truly mattered. His goal was not just financial success, but sustainability, fairness, and a long-term vision that would benefit not just the company, but the people who worked there. Under his leadership, the company started to incorporate more ethical practices, fair wages, employee wellness, programs, and a commitment to the environment. Keanu's influence was felt in every corner of the business, from the boardroom to the break room. But perhaps the greatest change was in the way the company operated internally. Keanu led by example. He didn't just tell people what to do, he showed them how to do it with humility and kindness. He encouraged transparency and openness, always stressing that the success of the company was only possible because of the collective effort of the entire team. Keanu was no longer just an actor or an accidental owner. He had become a symbol of authentic leadership. What made Keanu's story truly remarkable was not just that he had been kicked out of the boardroom. It was how he took that seemingly negative experience and turned it into something positive. Keanu could have easily stepped away from the company, written it off as a business mistake, and walked away with a profit. But instead, he chose to face the challenge head-on. Rather than seeing his ownership as a burden, he saw it as an opportunity to make a difference. His story isn't just about a Hollywood star who accidentally found himself at the helm of a business. It's about how unexpected circumstances can lead to real, lasting change. It's a story about the power of being genuine in a world that often values power, wealth, and status over substance. Keanu didn't seek fame in business. In fact, he wasn't even looking to make waves. He simply wanted to create a company that was true to its values and that treated people with respect. Keanu's leadership style proved that you don't need to be a corporate giant or a ruthless business person to leave a lasting impact. You don't need to manipulate or control people to achieve success. Sometimes the most powerful change comes from simply being yourself and leading with integrity. Keanu showed that leadership doesn't have to come from a place of ego or authority. It can come from a place of humility, empathy, and genuine care for others. In the end, Keanu Reeves, once kicked out of a boardroom, became a beloved leader. One who was hands-on, approachable, and truly cared about the people he worked with. He transformed from an accidental owner into a symbol of thoughtful, ethical leadership, reminding everyone that business success doesn't just come from profit margins and market share, but from the people who make it all possible. His story serves as a testament to the idea that no matter where you start or how unprepared you feel, it's never too late to make a difference. You don't have to fit the mold of what people expect a leader to be. Sometimes the best leaders are the ones who lead with their heart, not their ambition. Keanu Reeves proved that the greatest legacy isn't built on power or money. It's built on the connections we make and the lives we touch along the way.